The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat.
In response to the September 11, 2001 terror attacks, Americans were gripped by fear. Recognizing the widespread fear in America, President George W. Bush provided investigative tools to detect and obstruct terrorism by signing the Uniting and Strengthening America, by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism, USA Patriot Act. Critics argued the USA Patriot Act compromised their Fourth Amendment rights to the prevention of unreasonable searches and seizures for the sake of national security. Amid Fourth Amendment concerns, Americans demanded a balance between national security and civil liberties.
We were deaf, dumb, and blind to what was going on inside the country because we thought of security as something that was external to the country.
By the end of the Cold War, the U.S., as the only remaining world power, was left with a perception of superiority. Over time, the resulting false sense of security led both citizens and government to believe any threat was an ocean away, and the United States was under no imminent threat. This remained true even after several unsuccessful attacks were made on American soil, including the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993. With the Cold War won and no army in the world able to match traditional U.S. military might, the greatest threat now, ironically, is from stateless terrorists operating in the shadows. My work has been fueled by anger at injustices and atrocities, but always in another country. Now it had happened in my own country, my own city, my own backyard. On September 11, 2001, 19 terrorists hijacked 4 planes, crashing them into the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and a field in Pennsylvania. A total of 2,977 people were killed. The attack on the homeland shook the American people to the core. Paralyzing fear of additional attacks led many Americans to call for immediate legislation to prevent future attacks. Americans were fearful and willing to relinquish Fourth Amendment rights for national security. The Fourth Amendment requires the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. A poll conducted by ABC Washington Post in the days after 9/11 found 2/3 of Americans were willing to give up civil liberties to stop terrorism. In a second survey, 49%, quote, felt their sense of safety and security had been shaken, unquote. In the same survey, 62% reported they had difficulty sleeping. And in a third poll, 57%, quote, had taken steps to protect themselves, such as taking precautions when opening the mail and avoiding public events, unquote. Recognizing this fear, on October 26, 2001, 6 weeks after 9/11, George W. Bush signed the USA Patriot Act.
We're dealing with terrorists who operate by highly sophisticated methods and technologies, some of which were not even available when our existing laws were written. The bill before me takes account of the new realities and dangers posed by modern terrorists.
The USA Patriot Act outlined 3 major components, including Section 215, roving wiretaps, and the lone wolf provision. Section 215 specifically allowed National Security Agency, NSA, to gather any data communicated by phone. Roving wiretaps allowed easier tracking of suspects who use multiple communication devices to evade the FBI. The Lone Wolf program permitted surveillance of suspects not affiliated with a terror group, including private citizens. The Patriot Act gives government agents far greater power than ever before to secretly obtain your personal records. Probable cause or suspicion that you're an agent of a foreign power isn't necessary. The act also required improved intelligence communication sharing between the FBI, CIA, and other government agencies. Finally, the act increased punishments for acts of terrorism. Surveillance under the USA Patriot Act reflected the advancing digital age of terrorism and attempted to meet these changes. The government used the USA Patriot Act to keep Americans safe at any cost, even if it included compromising civil liberties. Since September 11, 2001, 9/11, Americans have been forced to confront conflict between the values of privacy and security more directly than any other time in their history. On one hand, citizens must depend on the government to provide for their own and the nation's security. On the other hand, technological advances mean that government surveillance is potentially more sweeping in scope than at any time in the past, and thus it may represent a greater degree of intrusion on privacy and other civil liberties than the American public has ever experienced. As terror threats were declining, Americans found another threat rising. The USA Patriot Act compromised their Fourth Amendment rights. In a poll conducted by the Pew Research Center, 55% felt it necessary in 2001 to give up civil liberties to, quote, curb terrorism. By 2011, citizens were much less willing to give up civil liberties to fight terrorism. Only 40% of those now believed it necessary. I want to deliver a warning this afternoon. When the American people find out how their government has secretly interpreted the Patriot Act, they will be stunned and they will be angry. "10 years after the attacks of September 11th, concern in America evolved from fear of terrorism to fear of a compromised Fourth Amendment. Citizens were suspicious the government was spying on ordinary people. The 2013 Edward Snowden leaks confirmed Americans' suspicions. The classified information exposed the NSA program secretly tracked phone records of ordinary U.S. citizens without a warrant. Americans realized their Fourth Amendment rights were compromised. From now, know that every border you cross, every purchase you make, every call you dial, every cell phone tower you pass, friend you keep, article you write, site you visit, subject line you type, and packet you route is in the hands of a system whose reach is unlimited, but whose safeguards are not." Based on the mass tracking and collection of Americans' information, citizens called for change to the USA Patriot Act. Balance was necessary to allow the protection of citizens' civil liberties while protecting the security of the nation. Fortunately, USA Patriot Act sunset provisions allowed Congress to create better balance between national security and civil liberties. As fear of an imminent attack waned, methods to fight terrorism transitioned from reaction to reason.
If you have to sift through a billion emails because you're looking at everyone's, is it going to be as effective as if you target people who there are actual suspicions for?
After the horrific terrorist attacks on America's homeland in 2001, Americans, paralyzed by fear, called for legislative action to combat terrorism. After the initial fears subsided, citizens realized their civil liberties guaranteed in the Fourth Amendment were compromised by the USA Patriot Act. As new technologies and threats of terrorism arise, continued changes to national security will be necessary, such as uniting and strengthening America by fulfilling rights and ensuring effective discipline over monitoring, USA Freedom Act, passed by President Obama in 2015. The USA Freedom Act changed how the government gathers data by specifically focusing on terror suspects rather than ordinary citizens. The USA Freedom Act has helped rebalance our feelings about civil liberties and stronger government. It is a sign that the emergency of 2001 is over, and we can have a different national conversation about what makes sense for us as a country. The USA Freedom Act is a first step towards advancing the security of the nation without compromising civil liberties. With evolving technology and ever-changing threats to national security, American citizens continually face the responsibility to ensure that new national security policies do not compromise civil liberties.